Welcome back, everyone. It's Monday, April 1st. I'm Corey Mull here with Olivia Ekbene and Ashley Tishins. I have some unfortunate news to break here.
Really sad.
Ugh, it's tough.
It's really
This is
tough
our
news of the
last
club.
show of On the Line. Sad.
Shed a tear.
It's sad. We've been doing it for so long, you
Yep.
know. Gosh.
I'll have a lot of memories. We started the show 7 years ago, and it's just been a part of my life. April Fools! April Fools!
I love how you said it's part of your life. I love
April
it's part of all of
Fools.
our lives. I love it.
Sorry, I couldn't stop from talking
I
about the whole
couldn't stop
time.
as soon as you said. I could have probably kept going, but
No,
here we are.
so that's what they do in Saturday Night Live. They're supposed to have the joke, but they can't crack. You gotta play out the joke.
There you go.
Anyway, we are going to get into the show today, and we have a big one. It was an outrageous weekend across the country. We had Florida Relays, we have Texas Relays, we had Stanford Invitational, Rally Relays. We'll get into some breakdowns from those big races and events, and then we'll discuss our favorite track content creators across the U.S. We'll also go into the Arcadia Invitational and much more. Let's get started, though, with the first thing to happen this weekend. It was at the Texas Relays. The national performances were littered across the weekend, and obviously we had a really great selection of things happening there in Austin. Olivia, I want to start with you. What went down in Mike Myers?
Yes, at Mike Myers Stadium, we saw Elizabeth Leachman take the track for the 5K. She was in a college field. The weather was beautiful, not very windy. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. Eventually, as the night went on, I ended up freezing, was shivering. But for the most part, it was the perfect conditions to break a national 5K record. And that's exactly what we saw. Here we have Elizabeth Leachman from start to finish, just take control of this field, took down Natalie Cook's 5K outdoor national record. She went 15:25:27. And she even took down the meet record, which was insane, of 15:29:85, which stood since 1984. So to be able to just see that was incredible, and it was just amazing to just see Elizabeth kind of in her element once again, getting out hard, separating herself. She even lapped the field. At one point, you said you saw her waving.
Yeah.
Which was incredible, like just waving to her friends. And I think I had a chance to talk with her afterwards, and she told me that she had no idea that her teammates from San Antonio were driving up to watch her compete that night. And that was a late evening, too. It was like 9 o'clock at night when this went off. So
Beautiful weather, though.
Beautiful weather, yeah.
It was a beautiful time to run, a 5K under the lights at Texas Relays. Texas Relays isn't something that's built for 5Ks or distance races. Obviously it's pretty hot in Austin, so to get that environment for her was ideal all around. Ashley, I know we talked about this last week. You thought she was going to shatter it.
It was
She
really
had to
close.
she had to fight for it.
Yeah,
she did.
Yeah, I know. But I think that just shows that this is something she wanted to go for. Even when it came down to the line, like she ran all the way through, and boom, she gets it. But again, I think it just, to me, it solidifies, like, she's in a special position right now, and I think we've seen that since, especially toward the end of indoor. I think ever since she lost the mile at Milrose Games, I feel like we've seen something switch where she's been doing, the 2 mile, the 32, the 5K more since then, but like, it's just very apparent that she's in this new headspace. She's, I think Olivia, you've spoken to her coaches before, and I think you've gotten that from them as well. She's been working on strategy a little bit, and not trying to be too overly ambitious, but also ambitious at the same time. So again, just incredible. But I wasn't surprised. I was not surprised. I know I did say that I thought she'd go like 15:20, but still.
I think one thing we didn't necessarily take into account that much when we talked about it last week was the turnover from indoor, which was only about 2 weeks, and how much can you really improve in 2 weeks when you have that on your legs? You have to then recover and then get back to it. I mean, there's only so much you can kind of cut off from that performance. And when she did talk to you, she talked about really digging in. I think when it got hard, obviously she fell off the pace a little bit. She was supposed to sort of be at those 1K markers at a certain time, and she really the last 800, she needed a 2:22 to finish, which is for a 5K is pretty fast for a high school girl. So able to do that in the final 400, and yes, the fan group was crazy. They were screaming their bodies were just sort of like everywhere. They were screaming so loud. It was great to see. Good stuff from Leachman, unquestionably the top distance girl right now in the country.
Absolutely. I mean, when you have a national record 5K, also the 32 earlier this season.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's no top on that.
You only run the races that are put in front of you against the competition that's in front of you. Obviously, we have a pretty good group of girls in the country, Addison Ritzenheim and many others. Maybe at some point down the end or late stages of the year, we might see that. But one other question, Olympic trials. This was put into the interview a little late when you were talking to her. You know, she is under basically the qualifying mark. Do we think we could see her at the trials?
I think we could. And I say that because knowing Elizabeth Leachman, we all know she's a gamer. And I feel like just even having that opportunity to experience that, I think I mentioned this before on the show multiple times before, like when you're in that element, you're kind of soaking it all in. And then the next time that you're there, you have a clear vision of like where you want to go. So if she has an opportunity to be within that, I think it's the top 30. I think
30, yep.
Top 30 allows some of those athletes who are not hitting that ACE standard. I think it was 15:10 to be able to compete. I say just go for the experience. Like there's no pressure. Just go out there and just run. So I say yes.
Yeah, I agree. You know, again, like I think that would be a great experience if that's something she wants to do, right? If she wants to have that opportunity and go after that. But I think like she would compete well against these athletes. I mean, you'd probably have a mix of collegians and pros, but like I think Will Grundy and I were talking about this last week in the office. Like going into Texas Relays, we were like, all right, gosh, the national record's like 15:25. Like where would that have ranked among just collegians last year? And she would have been like near the dang top, like not too far off of what Parker Valby did last year. Not to compare the two because it's, you know, not probably a fair comparison, but like I think that if she wanted to do that, like not only would she be there, but I think she could compete.
Yeah, if it does sort of fit, you know, if there are women that have got that auto and then there's enough runoff where maybe she gets underneath that 30 woman field. Yeah, I say do it too, because finally you'll be in a race where you're not the best girl and you're kind of running with the pack in a group, and then that's a whole different conversation that you then have to have with yourself. Leachman was obviously the biggest storyline, but we had many others. I mean, let's talk briefly about Duncanville. 39.73 in the 4x1 on Saturday. Once again, go under 40. It's a really great performance, Olivia.
Yeah, Duncanville just looked amazing in the 4x1 for sure. We've been talking about this, I guess, ever since we saw the national record fall. Like, how many other programs can we just see kind of dip underneath some of those really big marks? So for Duncanville to get that 39.73 was great. I know I had a chance to see Archbishop Carroll as well bring a squad down to compete, and they were excited to do that as well. 40.73 for them. Working on some fine-tuning stuff, and before you know it, nationals will be here. So we're starting to see a lot of great gentlemen like put together some strong relays.
Ashley.
I think this is just evident that we're in a pretty special year when it comes especially to the 4x1. It's not super often that, I mean, hardly ever. You don't see this often where you're going to see a team go sub 40 seconds multiple times in a season, and it's only March, and they've, gone under the previous national record twice now. So Duncanville's putting those pieces together, and I think it's just a matter of, all right, as you're going through the rounds of UIL, like, where can you go next? And, eventually then, you're going to have guys competing individually as well, especially when you get to states. But this is definitely a sign that, they're in this to run fast for the 4x1.
Right? Yeah. And the weekend also featured, Carol, as you said, 40.73. But American Heritage from Plantation right around the Miami area, 40.36 in the same race as Duncanville. That's one of their top performances in school history. They ran 40.14 at state championships a couple of years back. But this group has 3 sophomores on it,
yes,
and a senior. I think by year's end, you could get them, I think, very close to 40.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a crew of sophomores that we saw last year as freshmen. I'm thinking Zamari Sanders and that crew. Like they made a name for themselves early on, and we know kind of the history with American Heritage and churning out sprinters. So I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah, I ended up seeing their coach, Greg Barnes, in underneath the stadium, and I, talked to him a little briefly after, I interviewed the boys, and he said, really good group. He really got all of them pretty recently, so he's working with them, and they've improved immensely under his leadership. I think he's the guy to get to that point, and maybe they're the first Florida team under 40. Couple other things before we move on. Lillian Harden, 13.22 in the 100 hurdles. Wow.
Amazing.
Mason Dossett, 13.27 in the 110s.
Wow.
Any other notables from Texas Relays you want to point out?
For me, in the pole vault, Jalitha Muhammad cleared 14.4, which I thought that was great. I think that's her second performance over 14. Or I'm thinking about indoor too. Okay. Well, indoor she went 14.7 and some change. So for her to just kick off outdoor with a 14.4, I think is impressive. So great performance in the pole vault.
All right, let's move on to the Florida Relays in Gainesville. Maybe the top producer of results over the weekend. Top billing, maybe elite results, best moments maybe came from the Florida Relays. And let's start with this, Ashley. What do you want to start with when we come to the Florida Relays?
How could we not start with our guy, Quincy Wilson? Come on. Quincy Wilson, Bullis School travels down to Florida Relays. He enters the 400. Boom, he pops off a 45.19. Crazy. I mean, if you watch that race, I'm not surprised. It's Quincy Wilson. We saw what he did, setting the national record indoors. Opens up outdoor, 45.19. Second all time for sophomores, only behind Jonathan Sims. And he gets that auto qualifier for the Olympic trials. So his ticket's booked.
Was that the goal? I mean, we can't get
know.
inside their heads, but you have to think that you want to get that early.
Yeah.
You already made sort of the comment, and now you want to realize that, and this is the first big opportunity to do that. So was that what he's doing?
I have no idea. I think Quincy's just doing Quincy things. I don't even know if that was in his brain on Saturday, hey, let me just hit this Olympic standard. I think he just went out there, just wanted to see how fast he can go, and then boom, 45.19 to stop the clock.
Yeah, it was competitive too.
Yeah, it was.
It was a very competitive 400. That's the place I think you want to sort of test yourself. And for it to come right off of New Balance Nationals indoor just reiterates that he is in locked in form. And I mean, I don't know if we would necessarily want to get into technique or intangibles that's going to clip more time off that 400, but there is obvious growth that he can still make in this distance going further this year, right?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like once he probably looks at the film with him and Coach Lee, they might be able to be hey, we need to fine tune some of this area, technique wise, or maybe getting out maybe a little bit harder from the start, whatever that may be. And plus, the fact that it's literally April 1st right now, we still have some time until, if he decides, to take on that next step to go to Olympic trials, there's still time for him to improve in different areas and even get some strength underneath him too. So, gosh, it's just wild to think there could be improvement, but there's always something that you can always fix.
I did listen to the interview that he conducted with Mark Stonesiver afterward, and he said that he was basically taking note of his splits, each 100-meter. It might even be each 50-meter split, but he was very aware of that, and he said,
how are you aware of that? 50?
Yeah, how can you when you're running blind?
Maybe Joe Lee's. He said Joe Lee was maybe on the 300-meter mark, I think.
Okay, that
maybe
makes
telling
sense.
him where he was at that point, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, he said he looked into the race. He obviously was studying it beforehand. He said he studied Justin Robinson's 44.8.
Eight.
No, it might have been 9 from COVID. I think he ran that race.
Yeah. Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
It came out of nowhere. We're Justin Robinson went, what?
So
that
Justin
makes sense.
Justin Robinson, though, is the model possibly that they're looking at to sort of replicate.
44.84?
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes.
I thought it was
yes.
somewhere in that, because I was just looking at the all-time.
Yeah. It's
Stay
interesting,
tuned
though.
for my comments.
He's got a body of work that he can look to and maybe work off of. I mean, all great athletes want to study tape. He does the same thing.
Right.
Let's move to the 4x4 national record that the girls put down. Ashley.
I think I saw this online and afterwards and saw the stream that we had, and I was like, wait, we just broke a national record? I guess that wasn't something I was thinking of seeing this weekend. Bullis girls 4x4 national record at 3:35.23. I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like you can expect nothing less from Bullis, but this was a record that had been standing for a really long time, 20 years. It was held by Long Beach Poly, I believe. I mean, hey, now we're just going to see that time theoretically drop.
Why are all these 20-year records going down is another question.
That's another question. That's a whole nother
It's
show.
just it's the year. I don't know.
I say it's a year. I don't even know. It's wild.
It is. You don't
Like, does that mean 20 years from now we're going to be thinking about this? Like,
probably.
wow,
I mean, I
20
think
years.
obviously you put into account shoes.
Shoes,
Spikes.
training, coaching, all that.
Yeah. You have better coaching, but I think coaching has always existed to a certain extent, and everything's a little bit more nuanced now in the way you attack training, I think, because, if you think about 20 years back, some of those track coaches, I think the training wasn't available to be super complex, I think, right? Some of the things that they're doing now with, like, just at a distance level, like, the VO2 max and all that stuff, I think is different than what it was 20 years ago. But I don't know. It's still weird. Like, athletes don't change that much, right? Do they?
I have no idea.
We just had a good gene pool with
Yeah,
this
gene pool.
group
We don't
of
have
kids
like-
right now. Like, I don't know, but I do agree with like maybe it's more nuanced. Like you can specialize more in ways. Like, I don't know. Yeah.
It's interesting. So Bullis School obviously performed exceptionally well with Quincy. Bullis School girls, Colin Abrams ran really well too. Let's go to Christian Miller from Creekside. Our guy got off to the mark in the 100 now. Olivia.
I just wish it was win legal. That was just my only.
I wish he was in the same heat as Kane Stanley.
Yeah, like what's up with that? Why are we not having them race each other?
I don't know.
Come on.
That also breaks my heart. But for me, I'm like 2.0. We just need a 2.0. 10:14 for our guy Christian Miller. Already has the fastest time in the 200 right now. Just ticking away. Just doing Christian
He's
Miller.
the guy. He's the guy.
The guy.
Right now in the sprints.
Right about where we thought he would be.
Yeah.
Also, leading his 4x1 team to 40.7
Also
at Floyd
fast.
Relays as well. That's a very good mark overall. Only thing we haven't touched on is Quincy's 4x4 team. Those guys, 309. Talked about this last week. That's right around where we thought they would be, and it kind of leads them into the next few weeks, which are higher stakes, more important meets ahead. So looking toward that. Let's move to the Stanford Invitational, which was out in Palo Alto this weekend in the land of Facebook. We saw some top performance there, and Californians squared off. Ashley, you were out in Palo Alto. What'd you see?
May not have seen Mark Zuckerberg like you asked, but I saw some good performances going down at Stanford. Very high school heavy. We saw some of the best high schoolers, especially in California, come out and compete. And I think if I had to pick one performer from the meet on the high school side, it'd have to be Evan Noonan, junior out of Dana Hills. Big 4:06.80 1600 meter win. He closed in 58 seconds.
Wow.
Which I had a chance to talk to him afterwards, and I was like, all right, so what's the plan here? Because you had Grant Morgenfeld, who went out just like straight from the gun. Like he was out on an island on his own, but then there was Evan Noonan like sitting comfortable back in the pack all the way up until that 1200 meter mark. And that's when he was able to really throw down a big last lap and PR. And he told me, he's like, I was not expecting to PR. I just wanted to come and like have fun. We may have a race video if we can get it up a little reel of his finish. But again, yeah, he wasn't looking for a PR necessarily. But I mean, you can see going into that lap, he was with those guys all the way back in the pack. But then look at that gap he was able to put on the rest of the field there to take the win.
58.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good
that's
for a
pretty
distance
solid.
runner in the final 400 of a race like that.
And he told me it'd be good preparation for. He's got Arcadia this upcoming weekend in the 32, so you just want to get a fast 16 out of the way, kind of, and just move on from there.
Yep, good stuff. Olivia, have anything else?
Yeah, Jason Para. Ashley was out there during the downpour, and so was Jason. He goes 9:01 in a solo effort in the 3,200 meters, so I thought that was just quite impressive, especially with the conditions that they were facing.
He's been pretty consistent all season long.
Yeah.
Other mark here I want to take note of is Jesuits boys. They went 10:22 in the DMR, which is U.S. number 4. Really good performance from that team that traditionally is one of California's best distance programs. One side question before we move on. You were out in California, and you had a couple moments where you were, just picking up food and coffee. And you also it was a very runner heavy area. There were a lot of runners. Well, what were some of your experiences seeing people out in the wild?
That was so funny. I couldn't go anywhere without seeing runners. I walked into Trader Joe's. boom, just full of runners. I felt so weird, like navigating and grabbing my snacks for the weekend. I went to one coffee shop, boom, runners. A different one, more runners. They were everywhere.
Any orders you saw? What's the common runner order? I mean,
Okay, at the one coffee shop, I saw a lot of people with avocado toast.
Okay.
Oh,
That was a big
yes.
one.
Yeah.
At Trader Joe's, there were probably at least 5 people that grabbed dark chocolate almond butter peanut butter cups.
Yeah.
There were a lot of distance guys in particular that were looking at all the candy and they're pointing at things like, oh, that's bomb. Like, oh, that's so good. So distance runners love their Trader Joe's chocolate.
Out in the wild, we'd love to see it. All right. Which invitational won the weekend? Big question that we had because obviously these are huge meets.
Yeah.
Florida Relays, Texas Relays, Stanford, Rally Relays. We put in the numbers in the database, all these meets on the boys' side. Florida Relays, actually, the most elite performances overall. Miami Northwestern, Bullis, Flanagan, Creekside, IMB Academy, those teams all rose to the top from the Florida Relays. So any differing thoughts here? What meet won the weekend?
I agree. Florida was popping off this weekend. They looked really, really strong. So I'm not surprised by the results here.
I think
in the system.
you see the top performances from the weekend there, but also as you listed off all those teams that had big performances, I feel like it was a pretty deep meet as well.
Very deep. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, obviously Texas Relays is obviously, it was great in its own class. And I think also too, and I think we were talking about this, it pulls a lot of, just various out of state teams as well. So yeah, I think Florida overall we know how deep Florida is. And I think Florida Relays is always going to be one where people show out, I think.
Yeah, I think one thing I did notice too, I was looking at elite performances. Texas Relays had more elite performances in Florida, which probably to me just means that there is a lot of depth across the board. Texas is a deep state.
Yeah.
It
You're
is.
going to have that long tail, overall. But Florida just had top tier.
Yeah.
The curious thing is Texas has the best overall moments from 2024 so far that we've talked about, like in the 4x1 and Jelani and things like that. So maybe we'll have a conversation at a different point about which state has been the most dominant.
That's the better question.
That's the spicy
But if
question.
we're talking about which meet from this weekend,
And it was Florida.
I'm going with Florida.
Florida.
Yeah.
Maybe for another day. All right,
Four states.
Another cool thing. You were out in California and you saw some of our favorite content creators out there doing their thing. Stanford University students Lex and Leo Young. Talk to us a little bit about these guys.
I think it was just kind of funny. I think I texted you all about this, but at least in the running space, Lex and Leo Young, they're freshmen at Stanford. They've built a following, right? They've built a brand. They have a YouTube channel. I think it's called L&L, and then they have, social media accounts as well. And if you're unfamiliar with what they do, they shoot vlogs and stuff, just documenting their experiences in running and stuff like that and being in California. And all of a sudden, I'm like out there at the 10K, filming on the track. Who do I see cutting in front of me? Leo Young filming Lex running the 10K out there getting the content. It's just funny to see sometimes those content creators like Lex and Leo, in college, just doing their thing. It's kind of funny.
I like the way they've approached it because we've seen them compete, but we've also seen them balance this side of the equation too. They're not overwhelmingly going heavy on one side and avoiding the other.
We've got the video. I got a video of them
the background
filming.
here of this reel that Ashley put together. I think the great thing about those two is they've struck a really great balance. They're obviously at Stanford, one of the best schools in the country, in the world, and they're keeping up with their studies. But also, on this team, I think you definitely need to have a really strict, awareness of your time and your responsibilities.
Yeah.
And they're able to do it. If you look at the resume, on social media, both of them are over 50K. Their L&L channel on YouTube, over 48K. They're both signed by On. They both sell apparel. So they're kind of doing all the things, making them sort of this brand.
Yeah.
And I think we continue to see it while they're at Stanford.
Yeah. And I think it's great too. It's just, I can only imagine the academics at Stanford. So the fact that you're training, going through, your classes and studies, but here you have an opportunity to kind of showcase your life in a different way and get creative. So it's almost kind of a unique way of how they just continue to live their lives like that.
It's a hard thing to do, and there's actually something we're going to stay on because we're going to talk about another runner that is kind of moving into a different space on the high school side. We're talking about Aria Pierce from Kansas. She's just a high school freshman, and she recently came out on Instagram, said she's opting out of the high school season in order to pursue maybe her larger dreams overall, which is to run high-level meets and improve and maybe be among the best in the country at those events. We're going to invite our Kansas resident, Max Bradley. He's an intern at MileSplit. He wrote the story on Aria last week, kind of outlining what's happening with her and what the decision that she made. So we want to welcome Max to the show. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Fantastic. Let's start a little bit with just what you wrote about last week. Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was?
Yeah, so Arya Pierce, she is a freshman in high school. She's been a very competitive sprinter over the last 2 years in 7th and 8th grade. And she's been doing it from a very small town in Kansas. I'm pretty sure it's in like the mountain time zone. It's close to Colorado. But she's been traveling all over the country, competing and racing at these higher level meets, oftentimes racing against collegians and even some professionals and beating a lot of them. So it's just kind of this sprinting phenom that's competing at such a high level so young. So it's kind of a unique situation that I feel like we haven't really seen before.
Yeah, and one of the biggest reasons why her and her family decided not to compete at the high school level is because there's a limit on travel outside the state, 500-mile travel limit outside Kansas. So that's the max you can do when you're in that Kansas State Association, and also 8 meets to a year maximum for each athlete. So they obviously have bigger goals than that. Actually, let's move to you. What are your thoughts on a freshman at this point in her career kind of making a decision to opt out of the high school season?
It's definitely an interesting move, but I guess what Max already kind of alluded to, I mean, like she's already, even as a middle schooler, she was making a name for herself in Kansas. I believe she's the all-time state leader in the 100 and the 200. Again, only just a freshman. And, historically, when you look and you see people that make that move, right? You're doing it usually to race against faster competition, and you're doing that to lead to better personal results, right? And, obviously at this point, like she's decided, like, hey, I'm ready for that. Like that's something I want to chase after. I think it'll be interesting though to see how this maybe tracks throughout her high school years, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure she left it open where, like, she's not saying she's never going to ever compete in high school. Like, this may be something that she ends up deciding to do, maybe not this year, but later on down the line. So just not going to do it this year, but it's definitely an interesting case.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, too. I think there's pluses to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because essentially, her and her family got ahead of any controversy that may have happened if she had run for her state association and maybe kind of been along the line of those rule books. They just decided not to even deal with it, go outside of it, and obviously do their own thing. Avoiding controversy is always good. Yeah. So it's a good move there. Mm-hmm. Olivia, what are your thoughts here?
Okay, so originally going into this, I was like, this sounds wild, first of all. And I think it's just mentally, you hear of these stories typically later in someone's high school career. Like, I just think about Shanti. I know she didn't like opt out completely, but when you are putting out these really fast marks, you're seeing a lot of the athletes put themselves in different competitions outside of the state association. So when I hear of a young, talented person like Pierce, and I'm thinking, wow, like, we haven't even really begun your high school career. Why on earth would you even think about opting it out? But just even hearing just how things are, like, you're kind of limited. You only are able to run up to 8 meets. So it's just thinking, wow, you're kind of almost restricting the athletes from being able to dive into bigger competitions. And so after just hearing more about it, I think, like you just said, I don't think this is a bad move. Ashley mentioned it. She leads the state in the 100 and the 200. She's leading the 100 by second, which we all know is a huge margin. And when you think about the 200, she's leading the state by 4. So ultimately, she's not probably getting pushed like how she wants to. So in order for her to do that, you got to step outside the comfort zone a little bit and be able to travel. And, we saw her compete at Stanford. She was in that 200 meters as well. Just getting that opportunity to think long term in her career. So I think this honestly is probably a really strong move for her specifically, as just where her goals are and just the talented individual that she is.
Yeah, there's always exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
And, I don't think we were saying that all students should pursue this. We don't
Right.
want everybody kind of going to the same path. Aria is a little different, though, based on everything that we've seen from her. And when we look at athletes who have done this in the past, they've all had great careers.
Right.
And they made those decisions in order to pursue them. Brian Herron, who's at the University of Texas, same thing, last 2 years of high school in Georgia, he opted out. Lex and Leo over the last year in California opted out. A Thing Mo did not compete in high school at all in New Jersey, probably the best example here. Tamari Davis, last 2 years of high school, opted out. Tia Jones, Georgia. A lot of people forget about Tia Jones, but she's one of the best hurlers in the world right now.
Yeah.
She opted out. And then Ari Knighton, we didn't even talk about Ari Knighton, but he signed a pro contract at 16, and he didn't run basically his last 2 years in high school. So a lot of other examples of this taking place. The one thing I think that's different about Aria is that she is in the influencer generation.
Yeah, yeah.
And
true.
I think those things are important now. She doesn't have a huge audience yet, but she does have accounts. And I think part of this is trying to commodify this experience in a way on a positive note, but still trying to sort of share people with your story as you do it. I think that's an important part here as you build yourself up and a little bit of the brand. I think, honestly, that's part of it, too. Max, we want to go back to you. What are your thoughts on this happening in Kansas, which is a very rare occurrence?
Honestly, it really didn't come as a crazy surprise to me, just because she's been running and training and competing on her own schedule the last 2 years. So it would have been kind of probably a big adjustment, a big shock to kind of go from doing everything, I don't know how you want to do it, exactly how you want to do it and when, to then having to go based off your school's competition program and just everything like that. Because like you said, there's a 500-mile travel limit. So she couldn't even go to Denver. She can't go to Chicago. Then there's not really any other notable huge meets happening in this region. So I just think it kind of makes the most sense for her just in the long run in terms of, I don't know, just gaining experience. Because you'd much rather lose, I don't know, at least for her, knowing her goals long term, I feel like she would much rather go to big meets and lose to faster athletes instead of just doing the same week or doing the same thing every week and just winning by seconds at every meet and just not really being pushed or challenged.
Yeah. One side note here, too, is, the high school track is subsidized by high school budgets.
Yeah.
Arya Pierce and her family now have to pay for all of
Yes.
it. The expense portion of it is not really talked about, but this is going to be a great expense to the family to now travel and do all these meets.
I guess my question now, opening it up to everyone here, do we see rules changing in the future, just knowing how fast these athletes are becoming, kind of being more flexible on limiting these athletes in a sense? Because we're thinking about Kansas, outside the state regionals, they're limited to 8 meets. They're not able to travel. But do we see maybe state associations kind of being more flexible in the future? That way they're allowing the kids to be able to compete at states if they want to, but also be able to travel.
Personally, I don't. That's super bureaucratic, I feel like. And if they were to make a change, I think it would take freaking forever for a change to even occur. But I do think in a way, it still does some rules I think have their place, and not saying that, a rule's right or wrong here in the situation, but it still gives, I think it makes it to a point where it's inclusive of a lot of different people to be able to compete and compete and go through the rounds of up to even a state championship or something like that. So I think in that way, it's maybe I don't see it changing.
Okay.
I don't see it changing either. You got to think about it. What is the sort of stronger organization? It is the state association, and they have to have these rules in place to keep their membership aligned.
Right.
There are individual cases like this that are outside the norm, but it is not the consistency of their membership. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, you look at Michigan, they still have, guidelines about traveling. Kansas has guidelines. these have been in place for years.
Right.
And they haven't changed. And teams have tried to fight them before. The main pain point we come up to always is Arcadia, because it's one of the best outdoor meets, invitationally. And athletes want to go from outside California. They want to go to Arcadia to compete. And a lot of times state associations have prevented athletes from doing that. Or if they have gone, they've suspended them and held them ineligible after they come back. So that's the issue they run into. In order to fight it, you got to basically take a risk, and that's at the expense of your season.
Right.
So it's tough. Max, anything else you want to add before we go?
Not really. I think you guys covered all of it.
Max, great to see you. Thank you so much for being on the show, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Let's move to a fun one, the next national record. We've gotten so many over the last couple of weeks. What is the next national record that you foresee going down? Olivia.
I might be crazy for this one. Actually, let me go with the non-crazy one, then I'll bring up the crazy one. I have two. 4x4 on the boys' side. I think we briefly talked about this last week with Bullis going 309.86. They did that at Florida Relays. 307.40. I could potentially see it coming
next. Next, though?
That's the big question.
Penn Relays, though, I guess. Penn Relays.
You got Penn Relays.
Hey, but we got Arcadia this week.
We do have Arcadia this week. But then the next big one, which I think might draw a lot of attention, I think the boys 400. And I have two athletes that could potentially take this down. Of course, our guy, Jonathan Sims, he went 45-1-2 last year at the AAU Junior Olympic Games. And, of course, Quincy just went number 8 all-time with his 45-19. So, I don't know, that 44-69 since 1982.
That one's a tough one.
That is a tough one. But the way how these boys are rolling right now, like, I'm just waiting for Jonathan Sims to have everything click, and then we'll be in a whole different probably conversation.
Ashley, what's the next national?
What if I told you that? Wow! What if I told you that the next national record goes down this weekend? Would you believe me?
What event?
Oh God!
The boys 3,200. Thoughts?
It goes down. I feel like, how many times has it gone down over the last 5 years? I think at least more than once.
Probably. The record right now is 8:33.32 from Colin Solomon. That came in 2022 at the Sundown Track Series. But if you look at some of the guys that are, if you just do a search at some of the entries for this weekend, you have Daniel Simmons and Drew Griffith, which we saw what they did indoors. Simmons broke the 5K indoor national record, and he absolutely smashed that record. And then we saw Drew Griffith break the 2-mile indoor national record at New Balance Nationals. So I think there's definitely going to be eyes. Arcadia is always in a meet where you're trying to run fast. You have all these guys coming together and trying to put down a fast time, especially in that 32. So I say it goes down.
That was so much confidence. I love it though. I love.
Is Griffith?
Take.
Okay. Yeah, I could see Griffith.
I mean, think about it. Griffith versus Simmons. I feel like that would be a pretty epic duel.
Well, here's the matchup. We come to decide who's the best distance runner in the country. Is it Griffith or Simmons? I think you can get up for that. But I don't know. Would you rather have the fastest time ever, or would you rather just walk home as a winner, or do you get both? Do you get both?
Both is nice.
You get both. In order to get one, you have to complete the other mission. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
In order to beat one or the other, you have to run that time.
Doesn't that make it more epic?
It does.
Yeah, I feel like that's what I think. I think we saw this last year with Arcadia. Like those guys watching, I think it was Birnbaum, Simmons, Rocky Hansen. Like they were going after something really pretty freaking fast. Like I think that's kind of the objective there. And I mean, even those guys moved up the all-time list for the 32 in that race.
Yeah, the special characteristic to Simeon last year though was that as they got in the last lap, all these guys were trying to hold on as much as they were redlining toward the end there, and they just didn't have the extra that you needed, and Simeon had that.
Yeah.
It's like he kind of generated from somewhere out of nowhere, and he just sort of moved
past them. Why do you think we call him the Silent Hawk? He has the name for a reason. We didn't just give him the name Silent Hawk just to be like Silent Hawk.
No, anyways,
silent and deadly and comes in when you least expect it.
Okay.
Anyways, that's the next national record I think is going to go down. It won't be long until we see the next
right on that one.
I like Griffith for that.
Pick.
I like Griffith for that.
Thanks.
So my pick here, after watching Mason Dossett in the 110s this weekend at Texas Relays, he ran 13.27. That's 4 all time, and it was win legal in the 110s, and he didn't have a perfect race. He was really happy about it, but when he came back, kind of reflected a little bit in that moment, he said he has more to improve on. The block start, obviously, but getting a little cleaner over the hurdles. He's got to get to 13:08. That is the national record in the 110s, but he's two tenths of a second away. Is that too much to make up in the maybe in a race like that? Maybe.
Get out a little bit harder and clean up. You're good.
Definitely clean up.
I say no. It's not that hard.
Okay. I don't think he's getting a win legal race at the Texas State Championships. I will say that.
Oh, no. You got to do that beforehand if you're going to do this.
Wait, I have one maybe. I'll throw this out here. Someone
for it.
mentioned in the chat that because they asked if they thought a national record went down this week and they didn't, but it was a Texas #1 all time. What about the boys triple jump?
No.
Carson Gordon 53 1.5 this weekend.
Do y'all know what the national record in the triple jump is?
No, so maybe I'm saying this.
It's 54:10, I believe.
Well,
What do you jump?
that may be
53-1.
He would have to improve a lot. Well,
Yeah.
That's a lot of feet.
Yeah.
fine. Never mind.
A lot of inches to make
It
that.
is up there. If you look at Track and Field News, the high school list,
Oh, I see it.
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's somewhere in the range of 54. So
I see it here. 54 10.5.
yes, yeah, that's
Okay, never mind.
That's a big leap.
that's a little much
No
to
pun
make
intended,
up.
but that's a big
little-
leap.
It's a little much. All right, we got a bunch of national records potentially down the line, so watch out for that. Let's move to Penn Relays content.
Yay!
We're moving down April, and this is coming up in about 3 weeks. Penn Relays moments over the last 2 years. We're going to talk about our favorite ones. Olivia, let's go to you first.
Well, y'all know this is like my all-time favorite meet of the whole year. I love Penn. To be able to run and then be able to be on the backside of it is just incredible. The race, besides Ashley's, that's like
We
programmed.
didn't even talk about a race.
I know,
yet.
but her race, when she mentioned it in the office, I was like, oh my gosh, I remember the feeling. For me, it's Gary Martin almost breaking 4 minutes in the mile. This was back in 2022. He ran 2 flat for the first 809 meters and then closed in with a 401.84. The atmosphere was incredible. Like, people were on their feet. People were screaming that last lap. Even when you watch the replay of the race, you can see the competitors on the infield even cheering and clapping for him. So that just brings back the memories of just the environment that comes with Penn Relays, and we almost saw history be made there. So Gary Martin's race really stands out.
That was a very special year for Gary, too.
Do you remember it too?
I mean, he
Can't
went
forget it.
into the most iconic meet in Philadelphia. He is from Philadelphia.
Yeah, I know.
That was a great year for him, and that's why everybody was pushing for him. Ashley,
Okay.
what's this race that Olivia already alluded to?
All right, I'll set the scene for you guys.
Set the scene.
We're at Penn Relays. It was a race we were all really hyping up leading into it about a national record attempt. It's pouring rain. It's dark out. There's people in the stands cheering with umbrellas and hoods on. It was the Girls Championship of America 4x8. Last year we saw Union Catholic go U.S. #2 all time, 8:44.98. And I think what I remember most about this moment is just like I'm running around on the track, like looking at all sorts of stuff. And then I think just seeing the emotion afterwards from that squad when they ran #2 all time, especially in conditions like that. Like they were just all super excited. Everyone was cheering them on. And for me, that was just like a kind of an iconic moment. You know, it just embodied a lot of, I think, what people get excited about at Penn Relays. And again, it was one that I think there was a lot of suspense going into it. Like, will they or will they not like do something, you know, climb up the all-time list? And they did. They didn't break the national record. They were really close, and it was a long-standing record too, but they're #2 all time.
Union Catholic just has those moments pretty often there at the Penn Relays too. I agree. Very good one. I'm going to stick with the DMR. I'm going to go, well, you said 4x8. I'm going to go to the DMR on the boys' side from 2022. I'll stay with Union Catholic. The boys ran a really great race, but the best moment was in the anchor position when Shane Brosnan got the stick. He was up by a pretty significant margin. But behind him was Devin Capiego, St. Raphael Academy, just chugging along, ate up that difference in the last lap and nearly stole it from Brosnan. But Union Catholic held on. And I think what was kind of cool, talking to Mike McCabe afterwards, he said that Shane was not like 100% on that. You know, he hadn't had a full set of training just yet. He was getting in that race, though, and they wanted to rely on him in that anchor because he had been there before. So being a part of a team, even when you're not 100%, shows a lot of will, right, and guts. And I think that Union Catholic team embodied that there as well. So good moment from the Union Catholic boys at the DMR Penn Relays 2 years ago. Let's finish off with the Arcadia Invitational in California, which is going down this weekend. It's always, a great meet. Takes top billing, a lot of interesting performances, and possibly national records go down there. We don't have a ton of insight into entries, but where do you want to start, Ashley?
I mean, I know we already mentioned some of the big names. Like, we're really excited for Drew Griffith and Daniel Simmons, assuming that they'll both be in that boys 32. I know some other big names. I saw Sadie Engelhart on the list there. So a lot of we see a lot of top distance talent. But then, you got to look for the sprints too. You can always see, I think last year maybe it was Roderick Pleasant that popped off at Arcadia in the sprints there. So you can always look for someone to do something, pretty big in the sprints there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Olivia?
I agree with Ashley. I definitely see Sadie Engelhart as an athlete to look out for. I believe she's probably running on the 4x8, and I think she's also running.
You run a 4x8?
Yeah.
She's listed on a 4x8, and then she's running
and
Love
in the mile. Yeah, in the mile as well. So
How often has Ventura put together a 4x8?
no idea.
Not often. Not a very, I wouldn't say a great one. But you have Sadie Engelhart in
You got
there.
3 other gals.
You got a 203 girl on your 800. You're going to do something special.
Do something special. And I'm also looking for Keelan Wright. She's been kind of on my radar for some time, and she leads the state right now in the 100 meters with an 11:61. So I believe she's also entered into running that 100 too. So looking to improve on that
I'll
mark.
give a shout out to another one of the top sprinters from indoor, Antoine Hughes.
Oh, our guy Flash!
I know he told us
guy
he
Flash.
approached us at New Balance Nationals, and we chatted with him, and he told us he was really excited for the Arcadia Invitational. So we could see something from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge meet, a lot of entries, going to have a lot of action from that. We'll talk about it next week on Monday. This has been another episode of Online. We are going to be back next week. We are not done. That was April Fool's to you. So stay tuned next week as we have more conversation around high school track and field. Thank you so much for watching. As always, it's been a pleasure. Take care.